For more on this, I'm joined by our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Hi there, Doug. So, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Tel Aviv. What role do you see the U.S. playing in keeping this from devolving into some kind of greater regional conflict?
Blinken has a very narrowly circumscribed mission here in Israel. And he'll also be visiting, making other stops in the region, including Jordan, possible visit as well, a planned visit with the Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas. What is it? First of all, one, to make sure Israel, as the Biden administration puts it, gets everything it needs in this time. We've heard Biden in recent days calling this pure, unadulterated cruelty, the Hamas attack. He is not, there's no false equivalency here on the one hand. On the other hand, he has basically given Israel carte blanche, a free hand to do what it needs to do, as the Biden administration sees it, to defend itself. So there was no urging for restraint, none of that message, rather basically an expression of full support. So Antony Blinken is going to reiterate that. He will also be sending out another message that the Biden administration has been sort of telegraphing in recent days. We heard Biden say it very explicitly. Anyone in the region, he didn't say it by name, but notably, he's thinking Iran, anyone thinking of exploiting this situation for advantage, Biden's words were, don't. This is another message that Blinken is going to reiterate when he meets with Israeli officials in Tel Aviv and elsewhere. And finally, the hostage situation, because the U.S. national interests also very much wound up with Israel's, in the sense that there are at least 22, as of this hour, 22 Americans presumed dead, at least 22. 17, according to the Biden administration, are missing. So perhaps meaning that they have been taken hostages or they've been unaccounted for. So it will also be in his interest to try to find out what efforts Israel is going to try to work out ways of possibly trying to get those hostages released. Yes, a very uphill challenge, given the fact that it's an incredibly, putting it mildly, an incredibly tricky, difficult situation if Israel, at a time when Israel's massing troops for what seems to be a possible and imminent ground invasion, how do you reconcile those two? A massive military operation to target Hamas alongside operations to try to make sure that those hostages are safe and to get them out. Some people suggesting that the hostages are going to be given second priority ultimately in this, because ultimately in their bid to appease public opinion and the clamor for a very stiff response, the hostages might be put on a back burner, however tragic and horrific that may sound to a lot of people. That seems to be the fear in a lot of quarters.
Let's talk more about the military situation, because as you mentioned, Israel's called up 360,000 reservists. There's been no announcement of a ground invasion, but how might this play out because of this situation with the hostages?
Yeah, well, look, the one thing there's more that we don't know than we do know at this point. One thing we can, pretty safely conjecture is that there is going to be some sort of massive riposte, retaliation, military response to this, only because, A, the Israeli leadership, the military have been since Saturday signaling and saying explicitly that that's going to happen. Netanyahu, in the past several hours, basically saying that when this is over, there will not be one Hamas who will, every Hamas will be dead, essentially. And he's been saying that the operation that the Israelis are planning is aimed at making sure, at decimating and eliminating Hamas's ability to wage any military activity. So that in and of itself sort of suggests how extensive the magnitude of the operation to come, how it's going to play out. It is unfortunately going to be extremely bloody. It is going to be extremely violent, not by necessity, by reality. These troops will be going into one of the most densely populated urban regions on Earth, in facing up against a Hamas that is a much different beast than last time the Israelis went in 2014, when there was a 50-day war with Hamas. That was a more limited ground offensive in Gaza, in which the Israelis were in and out in a shorter period. This would be presumably a broader operation with a Hamas that is is now equipped with grenade-dropping drones, with unmanned underwater vehicles, with any number of rockets and missiles, as we've seen in recent days, with a lot more help and funding from Iran, even though no direct connection has been drawn, according to U.S. officials, between Iran and the Hamas attacks on Saturday. It is safe to say that Hamas has been an Iran proxy, and Hamas has benefited from Iran's training and expertise in the past, not to mention its money. So anything that these troops are going to face, and they know it, is going to be much more. It's going to be a more formidable foe than the Israeli forces faced in the past. And I will just leave you with this idea that Hamas wants this. This is exactly the type of military operation Hamas wants to see. Even if it knows it's going to end up perhaps being decimated and take a giant hit, it wants to, in a sense, bring it on, bring those Israeli troops in. It fuels and it works to Hamas's propaganda and Hamas's rhetoric and Hamas's purposes.